Welcome to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum Zoom series, Trolleyology. My name is Kristen Fredrickson. I'm the coordinator of volunteers, public outreach, and programming at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. And thanks to those who have joined us for our previous virtual programs. Welcome back. Over the next few weeks, museum volunteers and staff will be sharing programs featuring Pennsylvania transit history topics and stories about our collection that you can enjoy from the comfort of your own home. You can see the full list of upcoming presentations on our website, patrolley.org, and I'll share the link to that in the chat in just a few minutes so you can click directly on it. Now, we have some viewers who have visited the museum before and some who volunteer here, but for those who might be new to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, we were established in 1954 as the Arden Electric Railway by a group of trolley enthusiasts called the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club. The museum opened to visitors a few years later in 1963 and is actually located along the route of the trolley line between Pittsburgh and Washington, PA. And you'll find almost 50 trolleys and electric railway cars, about 20 of which operate at the museum. About 30,000 people visit the museum each year to take the 4-mile scenic ride at the museum. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenter, George Gula. George is an operator and a conductor at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. He volunteers in the archives, he gives outreach program, and he's been here a long time, since 1975. He's been writing for Trolley Fair, the member newsletter, since 1977. And George has been zooming all over since the pandemic began for different museums and historical societies and organizations. So we are happy he's back for another program at PTM. And today, George will be taking us on a virtual interurban ride from Pittsburgh through Charleroi, south to Roscoe. The scenic Charleroi line featured a number of bridges. It followed today's routes 51, 88, and 837, and connected Pittsburgh and Allegheny County with small towns in the Mon Valley in Washington County until its abandonment in 1953. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session with George, but the chat box will be open, so feel free to enter questions and comments during the show, and George can see those at the end. So please keep your microphones muted like they are now, and we'll go ahead and turn off our videos here during the presentation so that George has all the bandwidth and so the videos don't interfere with the side of the screen. All right, George, if you are ready, take it away. Oh, I did want to mention one more thing. A lot of George's slides have text. But George will talk about the text as he goes through the slides. So if you don't have a chance to read everything on the slide, don't worry, George will be talking about what you need to know. All right, George, take it away. All right, looks good.
I first did this in about 2008, and it's been vastly improved, Kristen. For one thing, I've been here at the archives a long time. I've been able to talk to a lot of people about the line. I'm going to put just a few for the people who are out in California and Queens, and I know you're in Queens, but that this was the Pittsburgh area, and it was really a hub of many electric railways, and all the dark lines that you're seeing in here is Pittsburgh Railways. We had lines going up to Butler, these two lines here. One went way out to Harmony, far below this area here, below Washington was the West Penn. So there was an awful lot of railway activity. What we're going to talk about is this line in particular. This line that if you can see my pointer, is heading south through Bethel Park and Castle Shannon, down into Finleyville, and into the communities of Charleroi and New Eagle, Monongahela, and they're going to wind up ending either at Donora, or over at Roscoe. And the start of transportation in the South Hills wasn't a trolley, it wasn't a cable car, it wasn't anything that was electric, it wasn't a horse car, it was a railroad. And this is at what is today Bousman Street, looking from Route 51, at a narrow gauge, 40-inch wide narrow gauge Pittsburgh and Castle Shannon Railroad, which began about 1870, and took both passenger cars and coal cars from Castle Shannon up through a tunnel that still exists on top of the trolley tunnel to the face of Mount Washington. Now it's moving. This slide has absolutely nothing to do with Pittsburgh, but up on the top is a place I was born, Scranton, Pennsylvania, in 1886 in November, when the very first electric streetcar considered successful. It used the Vanderpool system, Down below is the much more famous one, the Sprague system in Richmond, Virginia in 1888. That used the trolley pull. And of course, everybody used the trolley pull. And here's the first trolley that was successful here in Pittsburgh. 2nd Avenue traction came in. That ran from Homestead and along the Monongahela River. That really is what, even though we had some experimental systems, this is really what starts everything off in Pittsburgh with electric railways. Now, that's 1890, and notice it's 1901 before trolleys creep over Mount Washington, and they start running up what is West Liberty Avenue in Pittsburgh, and they enter Mount Lebanon. It becomes Washington Road. But it's not till 1901 that actually electric lines enter, and this will figure in to the development of the Charleroi line. And the Charleroi is going to head south from Mount Lebanon. It's really a series of separate lines, some local lines that then are going to be merged with other lines. The Mellons are going to wind up taking it over and essentially giving it to Pittsburgh Railways. But we actually have better detail. And that's the first line, I believe, is, I'm going to use this one because it's the Monongahela City Street Railway. And it's in this little area here. It's only going to start in here and head down, not even, it's really not, it's a little bit down to a little bit below Mon City. It's going to head up eventually to Riverview. That's the first, if you can see my pointer, the first electric operation. What never happened was it was supposed to go across the river to the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad Station, which all, of course, was an important connection to Pittsburgh. That's going to eventually head down to Lock 4 in North Charleroi. That's as far as they're going to get. Now, we have the Charleroi, Belle Vernon, and Fayette City, and that's 1897. And they're going to start at Lock 4. So here's the Monongahela City Street Railway heading down. They're going to begin here at Lock 4 in North Charleroi. It's not Charleroi, it's North Charleroi Borough. And they're going to wind down up, heading down on what is now 88, down to Spears. Spears is just a mile and a half south of the Charleroi border. Now, before they even get running, they're going to be merged into another system, the Charleroi and West Side, and they have a charter down in this area in Allenport. So this is the segment that they're now talking about. Here's the entire line from Castle Shannon over here on the left, and you'll see this red line that we're going to talk about next. Here's the Allenport and Roscoe. So now, we built up from this area, Riverview Loop, through Mon City, over Eldora, down into Charleroi and Spears Township. Now we're going to head down to Roscoe. That was actually done, built by Pittsburgh Railways. It was only about 2.4 miles, and but we're getting a line together. Now the Mellons enter. The Mellons are going to organize the Pittsburgh and Charleroi. And that's going to go from Mount Lebanon. It's going to go 18 miles down here to Monongahela. Don't forget, they're going to, we have a street railway in here. They're going to merge. They're going to consolidate and merge their line with the Monongahela City Street Railway. They're going to start merging everything else. Their idea is to run to Mount Lebanon up here and run into the city. And this is the time when we're starting to see Pittsburgh Railways go, and so they 1902 Pittsburgh Railways was organized, merging a lot of systems, and in 1902 they start their construction, and it's a line north from Riverview, which is in New Eagle, just north of Mon City. It's going to run through Finleyville. It's going to run along what is now present Route 88. It's going to go into Castle Shannon, and they're going to terminate right there until they can move into Mount Lebanon. Don't forget the Pittsburgh and Castle Shannon Railroad is there. 1903, anyway, they start running up from Allenport all the way to Castle Shannon. This is what the line looked like. This is the cars, and we'll talk a little bit about the cars that opened service. I was down right after 9/11 along Logan Road in 88 taking a picture, and a woman wanted to know why I was taking a picture. I mean, that was scary. And when I told her what I was doing, she brought me in and she showed me this picture, and she said, "There's an open car." Well, that's one of the original cars running from Roscoe through Charleroi, and her idea of an open car was they were running, I suspect, illegally with the doors open. Must have been a real hot day. Here's Mount Lebanon Junction in Castle Shannon. And this is where the cars are going to come up. And they're going to get a 950-year lease together with the Birmingham traction. And they're going to be able to run through the city streets, West Liberty Avenue, Washington Road, where they encounter all this. Street construction, streetcars, horses and wagons. So obviously, the interurban cars are running on a pretty fast track until they get to Mount Lebanon. They have to run into the city this way, and then they're going to go up over Warrington Avenue, where the Liberty Tunnel is. They're going to turn south on West 51 up over Warrington, and they're going to drop their passengers off the top of the Knoxville incline, and you're going to have to take an incline ride down to the south side, and then you're going to have to take another Birmingham traction car to get into the city. And that's kind of a tedious ride until this happens. In December 1, I think, 1904, the trolley tunnel is going to open. The sign up there says you have to consume at least 4 minutes on the downhill trek through the tunnel. It's quite a grade. But what else is going to happen in 1904 is the Route 42, running through Beechview, running through Dormont, present-day T, is also going to open. So an agreement's going to be reached where the cars will run through Mount Lebanon and at McFarland Road, now Dormont Junction, and the Dormont T stop. You're going to be able to get on this beautiful private right-of-way through Beechview and a much quicker ride and into the downtown area through the trolley tunnel. Now, Charleroi operated trolley freight. And through an act of the legislature in 1907, they were able to do that, and they ran that freight service every day to Donora and to Charleroi until September 15th, 1941. Another view of the terminal. That first terminal was on Grant Street, up just below the City County building, and it's going to move down to the exhibition buildings on Duquesne Way later on. And when the city condemns those buildings, then they're going to go away. It's not profitable enough to find a new terminal. They had a park at the top of Eldora Summit. There's no roads up in there now. But this was obviously called Eldora Park, and that's going to stay open, I think, long after the Interurban quits in 1952. Now, everything's running fine, and you have this Pittsburgh Castle Shannon Railroad that we saw, and it's now owned by the Pittsburgh Coal Company, and they're running from Castle Shannon on this very nice right-of-way, which is along Route 88, Route 51 today. They're going to kind of circle around below South Hills High School and run through a tunnel. I said it was on top of the trolley tunnel, and their coal cars are going to be taken down an incline. The passenger cars will wind up going up Haberman, cross Bailey Avenue, and the passengers then go down another incline. And the railways is looking at this as a much straighter right-of-way. They start negotiating with Pittsburgh Coal, and so realize that that's a 40-inch gauge railroad, and the Pittsburgh railway tracks are 5 foot 2.5. And so they have to build everything like that with the 2 gauges. And you can imagine what it's like with the switches going to the mines and the passing sidings. But the northbound, first inbound cars or northbound cars are going to run on that track on June 15th, 1909. And then in November, the outbound cars are going to use this. This is around McNeely Road, just south of McNeely Road, which is called Elwyn then. And now you have this beautiful right-of-way, well ballasted. You're no longer on any city streets. And that's essentially the interurban of today. The steam shops are down in Castle Shannon. They're going to convert this into a car house. In fact, at night, they're going to continue to run the steam trains until about 1912. So at night, Pittsburgh Railways is actually running the coal trains with steam engines pulling them. This barn is going to last until about 1932. There's even going to be an administration building built in 1925, and that administration building will later become the Castle Shannon Municipal Building up until about 20 years ago. They're going to run interurbans not only to Charleroi, but eventually to Donora. So you'll have 60 minutes service to Charleroi and Roscoe, and 60 minutes to Donora. And this is at the freight station and the passenger station in Donora, which, by the way, was still there 3 days ago. Because I was down there taking a look at it. And in 1925, they determined that all the cars should run back and forth only to Charleroi and to Roscoe. Now, the 20s. You think a lot of things would happen, but this is Castle Shannon in the 20s. Not much is happening. There's not a lot of development, and no people living there means no passengers. So they're not real happy about that. And then they enter the Great Depression, and the revenue drops by a third. And then they go into bankruptcy in 1937. And I saw one of the proposals during the bankruptcy was to actually eliminate the interurban service. Now, when they open the service, they use these Pittsburgh Railways cars, these big 3500s, I think, from St. Louis. And, these were the long-distance cars that Pittsburgh Railway would use for routes like Sewickley. But take a look at the weeds over on the right. So that's a new line. And the weeds are already starting to come through. They bought 19 cars in 1910 from Coleman, the first real interurban cars. And, they had ice water tanks in them in the toilet. A smoking section in the back, and you boarded these cars in the back, and the freight was all loaded in the front. And then here's an interior looking towards the front, and you can see the freight station or the freight section up there. Stained glass, a lot of ornation in the car. They're going to buy these 3700s are going to show up in 1916. They're about 10 feet longer. Then the 3600s, about 52 feet, and they're going to have the nice bucket seats that the 3800s will also have. And now we start putting backup controllers in the cars, so they can wide the cars or move them in the car house without, backing up into something or somebody. Now, this is like our car. This is the group, actually, in which our 3756 is included. And they bought these light cars, these 19 cars, from Osgood Bradley in 1925. And the problem was they were light and they really flew down the track, but they bounced a lot, they shook a lot, probably not that smooth. And so they bought the 3800s about 3 years later in 1928. And this is down in Allenport just after we left Route 88. That's up on the left. This is down at Downs Lunch. Sam Downs owns the lunch terminal down here. And this is where all the cars would terminate. And this is a 3800 built in 1928, red, cream, like the other ones. And it also had the same interior. And then we had the PCC era. And for the original PCCs, Pittsburgh Railways took a set of trucks off 1278, which had been built to run on the 37, the short line that only went down from City to Castle Shannon. And they equipped it with a lower retriever. You could reach that rope from the back of the window. It had fare registers, a pilot, and eventually heavier trucks. And this became the guinea pig for the rest of the cars, 1613 and 19, and 1645 to 48, were all modified for use on the interurban line. And then later, in 1949, they would buy, of the 100 cars bought in the 1700s grouping, they would have B3 trucks put on the interurban cars, 1700 to 24. And these cars had toolkits and flashlights and, a trolley wire pickup and even a trolley phone, as they called it. Maps are always good. And the Charleroi line is going to extend down all the way down into, this is 51 and 88, the present day T, all the way down through Castle Shannon. Brightwood is the T, Logan's the T. Here's Library, where the line ends today, light rail. Now we'll start crossing over Finleyville Hill, down into Union Valley along Route 88, Finleyville. The line's going to go up another hill and down along 88 into New Eagle, Monongahela, crossing over Eldora Summit through Black Diamond. And we'll have a closer view of this. And then down into Charleroi and along the river over to Roscoe. And Donora is down over here. The northern segment's closer, and we can anybody riding the T can see all this. But beyond that, you can drive Seabolt Road and cross over McChain and see the right-of-way climbing the hill. Union Valley is directly along 88. Here's Finleyville. The trestle, evidence of the trestle can still be seen. Lanks is at the top of Finleyville Hill on 88, and you can kind of see all of this down here. And we're going to take a look at it now. And everybody, almost all the cars came in, not just the interurbans, but the city cars across the Smithfield Street Bridge. And this is at Water Street, which presently is Fort Pitt Boulevard. B&O Station was over here. This is well before the Parkway was built. In fact, this is Grant Street. This is before Grant Street was straightened out. Trolleys had to wiggle through here to get to Liberty and Grant. This is now the federal building over here. And I'm looking from the Pennsylvania Railroad, and you can see what looks like one of the big 3600s, 38 and the 37 coming in on Liberty, or rather on Grant at Liberty. And the cars from both Charleroi and Washington were scheduled to come in on a half hour and the hour, and they were scheduled to come in together. And they picked up nobody inbound from Castle Shannon, and they dropped off nobody outbound until they reached Castle Shannon. So they ran through Express. Here's the 38 making that turn, but got a yellow car in it, and it's got an interesting bus. And then they would go down Liberty, Wood. This is coming back, also seen from the B&O Station. You can see there's no Parkway here. And then it's going to cross the Smithfield Street Bridge, private right-of-way, and it'll make it stop here at the P&LE and then start heading off into the tunnel. Out of the tunnel, notice the derail. So coming in, an operator had to slow down to activate that derail, and then the activation relay was in the overhead wire. And so that forced you to stop and not just roar through the tunnel. Don't forget there's a speed restriction. And here's the Charleroi car picking up at South Hills Junction. People heading south, all dressed up, as was typical of the era. And there is on the hill, South Hills High School. That building's still there as a senior facility. And there's the old operator station, an operator dispatcher's station as well. And we're starting to come out to Warrington Avenue. You can see the freight car over on the left side, and there's a bridge right behind my last picture. If I turned around, I would see this bridge, and we're going to cross Warrington Avenue because we need to get up on this hillside up here. So Route 51, here's the Liberty Tunnels, here's 88. So here's how the old car line was up and along, but now they're on the hillside up above, and it's a narrow right away up there. That bridge over on the left middle is Route 42 and Route 37, the Brookline. And up on this area, there were two passing sidings. It was narrow because, don't forget, this was a narrow gauge railroad. And when I got here, I used to ride these cars, of course, for fun. And I would notice the spacing of the guardrail. And they were much smaller rails. And I was told by the track crew, number one, they were from the old narrow gauge. And I asked them, why aren't they closer in to the rail? And the guy said, it's always been that way. And so I figured that's the original specs for when the trolley track and the railway track ran together. And they never changed the specifications. And I believe some of that narrow gauge rail is now at the museum. Here's the double wire. So you wouldn't have to have overhead wire switches. You'd have faster operation. And that's above Route 51, which is down below on the right. And notice that trestle up on top. Here's a wooden trestle up here. And that was the original trestle over. And this is the original. I don't know what it was called back then, but it's called Sawmill Run Boulevard. Now, the county in the 30s forced the railways to put this new bridge in. And they built a 2-lane paved Route 51, which here is, of course, 4 lanes now. And you're looking south. And then the car line here enters double track right past that bridge, to the right of that last bridge. And we're going to be on this beautiful double track built by Pittsburgh Railways, funded by the Mellon family, the old Pittsburgh and Charleroi. And that station right behind us is Elwyn Road, which has become today McNeely Road. Along the present T, we'll be in Castle Shannon here, and that is Castle Shannon Boulevard here at Willow Avenue. It pretty much looks like this today. The T is a little different. Brick is gone, but looks like that today. Here's the administration building that they built. And as long as that was the Castle Shannon Borough building, it still had Pittsburgh Railways Company up above it. And these are 2 short library cars, since the Interurbans are not picking up people here. And here's what it looks like out there. And it's in the 30s. Still no development, as you can see, but a nice view of the 3800. And the line is, you know, for a line built and opened about 1903 or so, look at the condition of the track already. Not too good. Washington Junction, which of course became a junction in 1909 when the Washington cars were connected. And a lot of people today scratch their heads and wonder, why is this called Washington Junction? Well, looking at this southbound car, we can all tell why. And there's another nice shot of that. And the Charleroi car is the one on the right, but here are two Washington cars. And I believe 1613, no, 1613 is not there. But those two cars were part of the original group. And now we're looking out towards the hill going up through Molinauer. That town was a mining town, and it was called Molinauer. And many of those homes are still there in nicer condition. Top of the hill is Hillcrest. There was a wooden bridge to my left, Hillcrest Avenue. Today, this is where Horning Road comes in. And notice, again, farms, very agrarian, not that much walk-on business here. It's a little bit better now. And there's the old trestle that was still in place when I was here. Down at Mesta in the middle of Bethel Park. Now, this is Bethel, Brightwood Road in Bethel Park. And it's usually a very quiet stop. There's a big parking lot today on the left for the tea. Anybody living here knows Bethel Bakery is right down below. But Mesta was also an interesting place during the county fair. Because South Park was about a mile away, and when the Allegheny County Fair was held in South Park, you took the cars down, and there was a lot of extra service running, and then you transferred to buses. Now, when I got here, this gentleman was manager of transportation. That's Robert Parker, but he was working at that time in the schedules department here in the late 40s, and there's another shot of a Charleroi car and the buses. And the buses always showed there was a fair going on. And we'll head down on a marvelous piece of straight track. We're crossing Route 88 at West Library, where there's still a station and a little parking lot. And if you head farther south, that building is still there. It's the library school, and that identifies this Dick Booker shot. And right back here is Pleasant Street, and Pleasant Street, of course, is the end of the library T. And there it is. It's Simmons. Simmons was the name of one of the streets there. We're going to go under the mine here. There's a coal mine, and their mine railroad is crossing. If I can kind of look at this, so there's the mine railroad. So here we are coming down through, and we'll come under the railroad. We'll cross Brownsville Road. This is the T parking lot today in library, and we're going to assail this hill pretty much straight up while the road has to come along there. Seaboard Road is up here. So they built that to high standards. There's the mine. You can see the trolley overhead line poles here. And there it is, just flying up the hill while the roads are going somewhere else. That's Montour number 10, I believe. And the crossing of Brownsville Road. You can still sort of see this, particularly as the leaves are going to start coming off the trees. You're going to be much more able to identify it. There's still a little jog in a road. And if I'm looking at the bridge from McChain, you know, I'm looking downhill. But it was really a wonderful right-of-way. There was a crossover up here. There was also a station up here. And you'll go under the road. You can't tell where it was. It used to be a jog. You can still see some of the right-of-way, but as you come down the hill, and that's, by the way, West Penn 832, which is wonderfully restored. But this is the trip taking it from Charleroi, where it was delivered and put on Pittsburgh rails to its storage in Ingram. And this is Brownsville Road running along the side. And today, if you come here, there's nothing but wide roads, new houses, and this area is really totally unidentifiable. And I suspect some of this right-of-way is actually being used for Route 88. But the intersection of Route 88 coming into Brownsville is up here, and we're looking north from Union Valley, and you can see the hill flying up. And then a little bit farther south in Union Valley itself. I think that's 1718. And of course, it had a magnificent station, and that's a southbound car. But we're only about a quarter mile from Marion Avenue in Finleyville. That house, by the way, was still there on Sunday when I went down. And the cars are going to turn. 88's going to cross the right-of-way, but the cars are turning for 3 blocks onto Marion Avenue, and then they'll turn, and the bank is still here, on what is called Extension Avenue. And 2 blocks, or 1 block behind me, is a huge trestle that will cross the B&O Railroad. And I'm actually standing on the approach now to the trestle. There's a substation over here. That's still there up here. And you can see the trestle in the back. There's a little bit of rail here. You have to poke around for it. They built some very new buildings around here, but it used to look just like this, sans trolley. Now there's the approach to the trestle. The B&O ran under the girder section. It was essentially a wooden bridge otherwise. And on the other side today is a big shopping center, and Giant Eagle is very well noted up there with its signs. But then we're gonna, and this is what the trestle looked like. It's a very long trestle, double track. We're still doing double track. You can see the B&O there. That is the main area of Finleyville behind us. And this the better shot I found today, which was a little clearer. A lot of people didn't have the cameras we have today. We have to deal with that. And there's a 3800 in color, so you get to see what the color looks like. And the B&O Railroad is over on the left. Now, looking through, I'm going to see that shopping center there. But take a look over at Route 88. That is going up Finleyville Hill. The trolley is right away beyond the shopping center, is readily apparent till you get to the top, which is known at Lanks. There's 88, and that's the line car, M212, actually. Not the one we have today, but a much older version, a 2-cab line car, climbing up the hill at Lanks. And at Lanks, the end of this is the end of the double track. You can't even tell where that little wooden bridge was today. And the operator, of course, is on the phone, probably receiving instructions. I just found this beautiful color shot. Who I'm assuming William Vigrass, but I'm not sure. WCJ, it was the only way it was identified. But there's another color shot of one of the Interurbans. Now we're at Lanks Hill, the top, and you can see that on the Pittsburgh Railways map meant that we're going into single track, and we'll be going down a valley. Couple sightings here at Mingo School and at Crookham, and we'll head in past Matthews Mine and then into New Eagle, and then the line is going to start heading. This is New Eagle here, and then Monongahela, downtown Monongahela. I think that indicates it was paved. This is going to be a junction for the Donora cars. That's called Black Diamond Junction. We're going to go up over Eldora Hill, Eldora Park, under a major railroad bridge, a branch line of the Donora Southern heading over to the mills opposite Donora, down into North Charleroi and Charleroi Borough, and then all along the Pennsylvania Railroad in Route 88, and we'll end here at Roscoe. Actually, there's a loop right here on the Roscoe-Elco border. But here's the double track, and I'm looking down at the double track, and right behind that car, I used to be able to tell exactly where the bridge was there, and somebody built the house on it, and you can't really tell a whole lot. You can see some of the right-of-way beyond the bridge, or on the right of the trolley. This is a southbound car, but it was so easy to see until somebody built a big building right here, and then somebody built something else. Private property. And all the way down Route 88, this is essentially what the line looked like. We don't know where it is. I'll bet you none of you know where it is. But it is looking north, because the track was on this side of the road. and there were 2 sightings. One of them was here, where the Pittsburgh and West Virginia passed over 88 and over the trolley. And it was called Mingo School. And right behind me was Mingo Church. And that house is still there, and this guy's yard extends over here, and he's got right about here, he's got a whole bunch of chickens in a coop, and he wanted to know why I was here. And what I was doing was, right behind the car was a signal base of some kind, and I was looking at the signal base, color shot here under the bridge. So 88's been considerably widened, but that signal stand right here is still there. And now I'll head down about a mile and a half through this deep valley again, and I'm looking from the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Railroad Bridge, and I'm looking at Crookham. This is a sighting here called Crookham. all the way down through here. And some of the houses, it's at Laurel Drive, and some of the houses are still there. And I threw this in today when I just happened to see it, because we're looking at, and the now discarded right away, but look how high this bridge is. Today, Route 43's bridge towers over this whole scene. I mean, it just goes right on top of everything. It's a massive bridge. Another couple of shots of Crookham. They did have protection. The shelters were mostly on the inbound side. That would make sense. You're pretty much waiting there if you're going to the city. And we're looking south at Crookham. And right behind it, that bridge is no longer there. They rebuilt this. That's the first crossing over Mingo Creek. And then the car is going to speed along 88, and it'll cross Mingo Creek again. We're looking south. He's entering Crookham Siding, and then there's that bridge. You can still see the abutments for the trolley bridge, but they've relocated and pushed over left the Route 88 bridge. And there's how high the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Railroad is. And just imagine a highway going over this whole valley, even above that massive bridge. And we'll get that about a mile, and that's Route 88 where the houses are. We're going to start cutting around Matthew's Mine. The abutments are still there to see. And it'll come in the back of the mine, and it'll pass what's known as distillery stop. Here's Matthew's Mine, and the cars came out of one mine tunnel and went in to grab more coal. And here's our 832 moving up. But you can sort of see if 88's over off to the left. I used to be able to see these tracks a long time ago, and it's running behind. Then it'll join again at New Eagle at Madeira Street, and a block later, we're going to come out. Route 88 is going to join Route 837, and we'll turn obviously left, and we'll be in the borough of New Eagle. And this is at Willow, and I know that because I looked at that today. This is Willow Street, a southbound car, and all these buildings are still here. And then if I go up 2 blocks, I'm going to be at Dry Run Road, which is Route 36. And if you see this label as Pine Street, well, I'm standing right to the left of Pine Street, which is off to my right. So I guess either one is right. But the car is actually at 136 Dry Run Road. Never I knew where this was until I looked in this building here. The second house from the back is the New Eagle Borough Building at Cherry Street. Excuse me. And so the car is meandering down towards Cherry Street in New Eagle, heading to Monongahela, and it's going to get to what is known as Riverview. That's Riverview Loop over to my right. And so the Donora cars during the rush hour would come up this far, running through Monongahela. And you could also turn streetcars here. If you had to turn the Interurbans back, you could do that. So the loop is now on my left. And this is still Route 88 today. And then we're going to go scenes from Mon City. You're going to enter Mon City in an area with very nice houses, some very beautiful old homes here. And you will pass Chess Park, which is over on your right, around 7th Street. And pretty much the same area, I think. But that bus is interesting. Certainly one of the older cars, seeing one of the older cars on the line. Also very interesting. This is part of downtown Monongahela. And, you know, if you look at this today, this is where these buildings stop. The Endicott Johnson is the bar now. All these other buildings back here are gone. They've been redeveloped. There's some open space. There's a big sheets here. And it's really hard to tell that this was part of a very thriving downtown. And then when you get to the south end of Monongahela, where there was a Sheets now, there's the Bazilla brothers. One of the Donora cars coming through during rush. And here's the Donora car following the Charleroi car. So these are all northbound cars. Now, I'm going to leave Monongahela. I'm going to be 88's going to turn off to the right. It's going to go up the hill over Eldora Summit. And this line is going to stay down low now on East Main Street, not West. And if behind me, 1/10 of a mile back, is Black Diamond Junction. And part of that right away, a little bit of it, to reach some houses is called Trolley Lane. So these cars today would be on Trolley Lane. They're passing. Here's the Donora line heading off to the left. And just like you see on the West Penn, these little tiny soda shops were always there. And I hate to think of what they were like inside. We never had them up in the area I grew up in Scranton. And here's another inbound car. Now, I was able to drive up this far. The road that goes up this way is no longer totally open. There's some houses up there. This is Glendenning's stop, and that was the first stop past Black Diamond. And there was a big railroad overpass here, Pittsburgh and West Virginia. And as we reach the top of the summit, before we get to Eldora Park, there's the line, the Donora Southern line. Heading over, it's going to cross the Monongahela River. Between Donora and Black Diamond, it's going to serve mills on the other side. But it was quite literally very, very desolate up here. And you could see it toward the end of service. Ed Miller took a walk out here where Eldora Park was. And it's pretty weed grown in 1952. Just a year before it was abandoned. You can sort of see still this today. It's 837 crossing the trolley line right before it gets into Route 88. And if you look down through the trees, even when it's pretty weedy like this, you can sort of tell. We're going to start to go downhill. This was the most direct way into Charleroi rather than following the bend of the Monongahela River through Donora. And this is what it looked like up there. You can see one of the three bridges back here. And, my gosh, was it desolate up there. Must have been quite a nice hike. I think the river is in that foggy area down below to my right. And entering was pretty interesting because there it is, that where I said it went under 837. Here's the trolley line now, working its way down the hill. And Screechy Hollow, appropriate for this time of year. But they had three huge steel structures to span gullies and so forth. Number 3, 2, and 1. Here's Lock 4, and 88's going to start coming down from the left to join the line right about here at the Monessen Bridge. And this was I found this in the archives one year, and I was just amazed because here's the trolley line up on the hill. Here's bridge number 3. It's coming down, it's descending over bridge number 2, and then bridge number 1, a straight descent into Charleroi. Here's the Charleroi Monessen Bridge over here. And that's the mills steel mills in Monessen, and these were very big bridges, 491 foot long for number 3 and 143 feet high. Pretty significant. Today, there may be supports down there, but I wouldn't want to go in there. Ticks number 2. Also pretty big. I don't have the specs on that. I apologize. Ed Miller walked out to number 2 and captured the mill off to the right as well. And then number 1. Here's a car heading up to Monongahela from Donora during the rush hour. That's all North Charleroi, and then Charleroi down below. And we'll get down. You used to be able to see this very well, and then they changed the road, and the houses are there, and you could sort of line yourself up a little bit, but it really is hard to access that right away today. But right behind that car is the bridge, and there was another system that went over this, the West Side system, and it has a long name, Webster, Charleroi, Bell Vernon, and something, and I wish I could remember it. Just beyond that at 6th Street, is this beautiful color shot, Bill Jansen shot, thanks to the Crambles Peterson Archive. Wall is still there, very evident where this is, and this is also very evident. We're entering Charleroi. Here's 13th Street. Here was, where it is, Webster, Bell Vernon, Monessen, and Fayette City car barn. Right behind here, the rounded roof building is the Pittsburgh Railways car barn, and this is a radiology center today. And the car barn is still a transit building. It's the headquarters of the Mid-Mon Valley Transit Authority. So,
George, Joe Brantner says the system was called West Side Traction. Sorry.
West Side Traction. Okay. Ed Lightbarger had told me this, but I'll double check it and make sure. I wonder if West Side was its nickname, but we'll check on it. Thank you, Joe, very much. Appreciate it. Gene and Boats. I don't know if any of you remember Gene and Boats. Here is the old West Side car barn, and here is the entrance at 12th Street to the Charleroi car barn. And Gene and Boots was popular, and here's the way the barn was, and it still kind of looks the same, except it's got a whole new front to it. And the inbound cars usually came through the barn. They would get a running gear check, sometimes a car wash. As you can see, there was one track, I think, that went in the back and through the barn, and the rest of the barn was stub in. There was also 2 tracks outside the barn off to the left. So I'm running along the barn now. I'm running down towards 11th and 10th. And there's the back of the barn, and so all the cars kind of swung through. If you were going north, and the southbound cars kept going. And another shot there. The flags would indicate perhaps it's near the 4th of July. And the houses are all there. You know, it doesn't look too different. Then they had a very nice shopping area and a passing sighting around 5th Street. And the west side was 1 block up on Fallowfield. This is McKean. So within 2 blocks, you had 2 trolley lines. And this is at 5th. We're looking at 5th Street in Charleroi at McKean Street, 2 shots of what is a very busy business area. Some of these buildings have been taken down behind us. The May Stearns is gone, and the corner buildings have been, they've been taken down. New buildings are there. But there's up at Fallowfield. So there's the other system from a very early postcard. And many of these buildings are still here. Except the one that over on the left is a brand new bank, and the bank was built in 1925. Now we're making a guess. So if anybody knows, tell me. But we're out of Charleroi, and I think we're entering Mapleview sighting, because the railroad and the trolley at this point were exactly at the same level. Now those buildings could have easily disappeared because there are entrance ramps leading to 70. But if anybody is sure of that, let me know. And Leiborg and I took a good guess, although none of these buildings are here. If you look the other way, you're at Mapleview, near the siding, and there's our cover shot, and it's a northbound car, and the railroad pretty much, for the most part, not entirely, or the trolley line stayed along the railroad. Here is actually Mapleview, and you'll notice there are some still houses here, but this is also the area entering the interstate. There's the interurban signals that we have. That's the Pennsylvania Railroad. That's the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Bridge down at Spears in the background. We're getting a lot closer to it. 1949. It's about these cars were still running. It's about the time the 1700s were delivered. You stop here and you look at it, and you could readily tell where this was. Even with the bigger road over on the left, the wider, more well-constructed 88, and the building is gone, but you can envision where it was. And there was a bridge that went down that little hill, and you went down the hill and across the Monongahela there. And of course, today I-70 parallels the railroad right here. And then the road stays up, the trolley dips down. And so we're just south of Spears Station here, in a very weedy right of way. And we're entering Dunleavy, however it was pronounced. This is Dunleavy. And I've not been able to determine where it crossed the road because of different elevations. It's obviously 88 because they wouldn't put a Packard sign up otherwise. And if anybody knows an area where they use bracket arms, you can probably tell me. The bracket arms were expensive, and the Pittsburgh Railways generally did not use them. That building isn't there right now, but it is a southbound car. And another car is a fan trip here with the Riverview sign, but notice the bracket arms. And it was really tight up against the trees. That may be why they didn't want to spend all the money extending wire over it. But now it's crossed. Dunleavy is this area. We're approaching White Barn. The building is still there. It's called the White Barn Club, not the White Barn Diner. But you can see parts of this shelf. It comes and it goes. And sometimes it's just a little bit higher. Sometimes it's right here. The White Barn siding was over 600 feet long, so it was a rather large siding. The diner over on my right, I can't find hide nor hair that house anymore, up on the top. Although it may be covered by trees. There's the White Barn Diner back there, and the only building in this area. We're heading south, and Pennsylvania Railroad then is now carried a lot of coal on that line that extended down into Greene County and the mines down there. But it was an interesting area down here. Allenport's only about a half a mile up. Now there was a crew change that always took place here. It traditionally, and operators notice he's taking his money with him. And they may have done this from a schedule point of view to make sure the operators got back to the barn on time. And they could have done this because they were putting cars on time. The operators would just change cars. Now you'll go through Allenport. In Allenport, which is really behind me, it's in the street. It enters the street, and then as 88 swerves and goes up, and you can see this today, there's the passing siding for Allenport, which was put in about 1919. It was changed. Used to be inside the street. And it's going to run along the railroad. And I rode along a little industrial road, and it was there. And, I got past some plants. And every so often, you can see the two poles together. And it's just about the right width between each other, to put a single track. And then we're going to get into Stockdale. And I go through Stockdale. And at Stockdale, Roscoe border, these little towns are all just together. This is Cowan Street. And 88 is over on my right, and I'm within the last mile. And there's Latta Street, which is at Mount Tabor Road today. Latta Street's actually one block up beyond those buildings, and then it becomes Mount Tabor Road, but they've called it Latta. And it's single track, then it goes into some double track, and some of these buildings are still there. I mean, down near where Sam Down's lunch was, it really hasn't changed. Maybe the purposes have, not all the garages are open, but it's still like this today, except that the building isn't there. There's the railroad, and so we're running inbound, or outbound rather. That big building, I think, is still there, behind and above the car. And this is maybe not quite the end. It's the traditional end of the line, and the man's name was Sam Downs. Notice the spelling, so we always seem to put the apostrophe in the wrong place. And you could buy Interurban tickets here, and people got dropped off here. At this point, Route 88, which is over on my left, is called Chester Avenue. And this is Howard Street. So that was the location of the lunch. Today, there's a bus stop here.
We have some questions, George.
Sure.
Do you know how many miles from Castle Shannon to Roscoe? Asks
I was looking for that actually, and I haven't been able to find that yet.
Maybe somebody watching knows.
18 miles at least down to Monongahela. So, and it's 6 miles from Charleroi down to Roscoe. But I'll have to find out.
And we had another question. Was the red signal light on the bottom of the 3-light portion?
Wish I knew. Remember, I didn't grow up here.
Oh,
ask me about the Laura line, and I can tell you what they look like there. I mean, honestly, I suspect they were the same Pittsburgh railway signals that we used on the Washington line and on other parts of the private right-of-way.
And the audience is chiming in 35 miles from Pittsburgh.
35, okay. Boy, what a bounce that must have been all the way down. Whew. This was pretty rough track, and I have seen movies taken from the front of these cars, and they're bouncing side to side and up and down. Pretty rough. Now, we're going to go down a little bit later, but let's look at one or two pictures here. Notice the spelling again at the lunch. And I suspect that's a fan trip because that's 3761. And I've seen that in other fan trip shots. Okay, that is a southbound Interurban car there. And remember, these cars were light and bouncy, so they moved them up to the city within 3 years. And some of these guys, including our 3756, had to get left-hand doors for use on the Sewickley line. That's just sort of a nice boy, I like that. And the guy just relaxing, waiting to get on the car. But also take a look behind us. And the track is going to weave around, and it's going to go down into Elco. You can see some of the background, and that's why I've really put these here to see the background. And we'll go down within a half a mile at what is today an EMS station. Was a loop, and it was a loop with a little tail track that went off to the right, and there it is. And there was a shelter here. So I suspect somebody from Elco could actually get on. So traditionally, this really, in actuality, this could be the end of the line. And I suspect some of the operators might have taken some recovery time here before moving up and putting passengers on their car. So here's a fan trip shot, and you're looking from the tail track, and you can sort of see the little tool shed here. I suspect that the comfort station was at Downs Loop, that the operators had an agreement to use the comfort facilities. And certainly that helped Sam Downs because they would buy coffee and food. There's the Donora line. So I moved my mouse, and that's what did that. Sorry. So much of this here, this is where all the regular Donora cars, not the ones running through, but would end here, transfer passengers, and then run along mostly private right-of-way to Donora. And they would come in here on private right-of-way and enter at Meldon and go up 15. There was a sighting between, I think, 11th and 12th, and then single track all the way up to 1st and McKean Street. And I'm starting at Riverview, and because all these PCC cars are in here for one reason, and that was in 1946. There was a power strike in Pittsburgh, and Duquesne Light went out for about 6 months, and many of the streetcars couldn't run. But down here, Washington and Charleroi, they were able to run the cars because they were getting power from West Penn. And Washington cars, I know, ran between Washington and Canonsburg. And these cars ran from Riverview Loop, last turning area, all the way down into Charleroi and down into Roscoe. So, you know, we've seen Charleroi already, so we're just going to go down to Black Diamond. The tracks are behind me, curving off to the hollow. And here's the private right-of-way. And the Donora cars just wait on the side. And it's like this on the side of the road all the way down. Here's another good shot of that right-of-way looking south. And that little building over on the right, the one that doesn't look so good, is the little soda shop that we saw in the other picture. Now, a private right-of-way along the river, and there's the Donora Southern. That's the same bridge, the same railroad that crossed over in Eldora Summit, trying to get to the mill. And that connected with the Pittsburgh and West Virginia. The Donora Southern was a steel mill railroad. And then we enter at and this house is still there, but you can enter the street on Meldon Avenue. And I got the house number if anybody's interested. It's there. We'll run down a few blocks and then up onto 15th and then turn right onto McKean. And there's the passing sighting. Now, buildings are all here. Hasn't changed much over here. And then it'll run through downtown, and you can see the Y. So we're looking at an outbound car. And over on the left is the freight station and the passenger station. And while the track is gone in the street, a little bit of the switch and some of the tail track is still sitting there between 4th and 5th Streets. Anybody cares to take a drive out. And then we'll go all the way down to 1st, and all these houses are also there. And he's just going to do the usual change ends, you know, throw the seats back and wait to go. And here's a more dismal day. Looking at the other side of the block, many of these buildings are still here. So the last day of everything, down on the Charleroi line, the Donora line, was June 28th, 1953. And there's some articles written about this, and there's all sorts of noise. You know, they said there were dynamite caps on the rails. There were 80 people on the car just going down to Charleroi. And on the way back, and from Roscoe and on the way back, there were motorcades following the car up through Monongahela. And the accident was not an accident with the streetcar. But somebody was out here looking at all this and tripped and fell. But and you can see the name of the operator. And so this was a loud, noisy day on the Charleroi line, or actually night. Here's what happened then. The line was cut back to library in Allegheny County, right near the Allegheny County border, actually. And this is the loop they put in Brownsville Road near Route 88, called, and it was at Pleasant Street. And it was, I think it was Simmons Loop. And if you look in the back, this is a fairly new shot after the line was abandoned, because the coal mine is still there, and there's a better shot of that. And even when I used to ride the cars down the library and the trees were starting to grow, you could still very much see the right of way through here. The end then is the cars keep running. Pittsburgh Railway's cars to library will keep running right through the takeover of the Port Authority, and the line's going to continue to deteriorate. This is, of course, a much better shot. Some of the stations, the structures will be replaced with this sort of brick or concrete block. And, you know, the line was popular. It ran pretty fast. It had private right-of-way. It had the private entrance into city from the trolley tunnel and the Smithfield Street Bridge. And while the Port Authority would take it over in 1964, and within 9 years, almost all the streetcars were gone. But the Drake line, former Washington, the library line, former Charleroi, and also the 42, which also had extensive right-of-way in Beachview and Dormont into Mount Lebanon, would remain. And there was a lot of discussion on what to do with it, even as the system started to deteriorate. They suggested fancy stuff like Skybus, what would be running today in West Virginia, no operators. And that's a really long 20-year story then of how it will become the T, the light rail system that does continue to run in Pittsburgh. And that's another story. So that's the end. And we can start having questions if we want.
All right. Let me go ahead and share here. All right. Thank you so much, George. If you have any questions for George, we will get to them in just a second. We'll let everybody unmute themselves, and you can also go ahead and turn on your videos if you'd like. But before we wrap up, I do want to mention some of our other upcoming programs. Next week on Wednesday, not Tuesday, we'll host Dennis Kramer with a presentation called Small Town Trolley along the Allegheny River about trolleys in Armstrong County. And then on October 13th, we'll have a Johnstown show from Jim Gravener. And links to sign up for these are now on our website, and I will post the link in the chat if you'd like to click on it directly. Sign up soon. They are free, but Zoom does have a viewer limit. And we also have some fun Fridays coming up at PTM, both in person and online. On select Fridays, you can join us in person for a special themed tour. We've had 2 of them already, and they've gone really well, and we've got a couple more coming up. And we'll also have some digital presentations and some harvest theme Halloween activities for adults and for kids. And I'll share a link to this in the chat as well. So the digital presentations aren't part of the Trolleyology series, but they're still streetcar related. So October 9th, we have car cards, streetcar advertisements. And then October 23rd, we'll host Jennifer Sopko with Lost Trolley Parks of Western Pennsylvania. And if any of you are returning from our West Penn Trolley meet, we did host that program during the West Penn Trolley meet as well. And Jennifer said she's made some additions, but it's a similar program. And I want to thank everybody for coming today. If you enjoyed the program, please help us continue sharing them by making a donation at patrolley.org/support. And you can support us in lots of ways, like becoming a member or a volunteer. You can see all of that at our website. And thank you to those of you who did make a donation today when you signed up for your ticket. So we really appreciate that. And now let me figure out how to unmute everybody so that we can do that. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, you should all be able to unmute yourselves now if you'd like to ask George a question directly, or let him know any of those questions where he was kind of seeking information about where the photos were taken. But yeah, we're getting lots of positive feedback in the chat here. And I did get a question, are these gonna be available afterwards? We are going to publish this on the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum YouTube. So you can search for that, search for Pennsylvania Trolley Museum on YouTube, and we will come up. I've already posted Andy's from last week, and George's should be up by the end of next week. All right. Any questions for George? Go ahead. Joe Brantner, I see your mouth moving, but I don't see, unfortunately, I can't hear you. If we can't figure it out, we might have to see you chat in the chat box. But everybody is thanking you, George.
Yeah, I can see. Thank you very much for all of the compliments.
And we had a question early on about freight in Monongahela. Let's see. I think it was from Jimmy. And he asked if there was ever freight to, I think he asked, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it. He said, I'm assuming Monongahela never had freight service via trolley. I asked because I've seen a photo of a freight office with freight trolley listing Monongahela as a service point.
I haven't seen a photo, but they certainly did have freight trolleys because don't forget, they went down to Charleroi. There's a freight station still in Donora. So they did have, I just don't know where the station would have been. I haven't discovered that yet in our archives.
Joe asks if you were on the Pittsburgh Interurban fan trip he did in the late 80s.
I might have. I don't remember. I used to go on a lot more fan trips when I was younger. And, you know, almost 35 years at the Port Authority, you could ride the same track back and forth. And eventually, you know, what I did was start chasing the fan. I would pay for a ticket and get the itinerary and start chasing the fan trip to get different pictures. But in the 80s, I would not doubt it. And I do believe there was also a few bus trips that were down there. And I remember being on the bus trips along the Interurban.
Was the intent to reach California, PA, asks Darren Lattimore.
There was, as so many of these proposals that went bad, there was discussion of going down to California. And don't forget, these are rosy days and everybody wants to lay track everywhere. And, you know, they never had the financing to go beyond Roscoe. And probably when you look at today's population down there, it's probably a good thing. But I mean, there was a lot of, at one time, a lot of consideration to go everywhere. And I have seen a proposal once that we'd like to go down there, but nothing concrete ever happened. There was just no money.
Oh, we're getting lots of good comments. Philip wants to know, did the Interurban operate as a separate division?
Yeah, it did. The first Interurban division was at the Castle Shannon barn. And when they closed it as an economy move in 1932, they brought it up to Tunnel Car House. And there were two divisions there. And it, in Port Authority days, I believe at one point, I remember in the 70s, two divisions. They had two seniority lists, you know, and two different picks. There was just the overhead stuff that was pretty much done on one basis. So they did have interurban operators and they have city operators. Yeah.
Jimmy says he has photographed the Donora station and the current owners are aware of its history and have made an effort to keep it in good shape. So that's good.
It's in pretty good shape now.
Yeah.
Amazingly, you know, for something that was discontinued in June of '53, it is in good shape. So it's obvious somebody was taking care of it and it's concerned about it because they still have the track in there. The spur is in there, and that's property that maybe somebody could have built on, but it's still there. So I'm glad that they're doing that.
And Bill Hearn says the line in New Eagle had a short spur line to what was the old West Penn Power Garage, which was 2 blocks south of Riverview Loop. And you can see the old brick layout heading to the side of the building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you'll have to go check that out.
So this is after you make that S turn. And yeah, you're on Main Street probably. I'm going to have to look at that.
Always more to explore.
What's that?
I said always more to explore.
Oh, there's always something to explore. Yeah, it would make it easier if they'd fix the washout on Route 88, but it's a long detour.
Do you know if the Donora station is considered a historic building or has any kind of status?
I have not seen the usual plaque that's been put up there. I haven't seen that, so I don't know.
Oh, and back to the garage, the old West Penn garage is an auto service garage, says Bill Hurd.
Oh, okay. So they're reusing the building, repurposing it.
And then we did get a question from Mark, who asked for a small overview of your career. I guess the...
Oh, well, you know...
you worked in transit.
I did. And when I came home from Penn State, back then we had a program called business logistics, and it's so much more complicated now, and it involves, computers and warehousing and everything else. But that's where I got my education at Penn State. And when I came home, it just so happened, it's the only time I've ever had a political friend. It just so happened they had just started the County of Lackawanna Transit in Scranton. The bus company had been out for a year, and our family attorney happened to be the board chairman. So I asked him if I could work there. And then, I kind of as an intern for 2 years, in a sense. ATE, American Transit Enterprises, was running it. And then I sent resumes out to both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, because I wanted to stay here in Pennsylvania, and I really wanted to work in Philly. I wanted to be where there were streetcars. And Philadelphia didn't want anybody, I guess, that knew about Philadelphia. But one night at Christmas time, or around Christmas, there was this big family fight going on at the dinner table, and I had to shut everybody up because it was Harold Geisenheimer, who was the general manager of Port Authority, and he wanted to talk to me. He had got my resume from Bob Parker, the same Bob Parker that you saw in the picture down at Mestostop. And so we actually we met in Philadelphia on a fan trip on, what was it, car 73. So my job interview was on a Red Arrow Senator car. And then I came out here, and I started in the schedules department as what was colloquially known as a checker, traffic surveyor. And that got me around the city real fast, because you were in all sorts of spots, watching buses, counting people. But I stayed in the scheduling department, and periodically moved over to rates and service all the way till I retired in 07 or 8? When you've been retired for a while, it all blurs together. But that's pretty much. So I did scheduling, and I did the public timetables. And for years, I used to try to keep ahead of the counterfeiters when we did not have computerized fare instruments. And there was a lot of stuff. You remember the job description said, "and any other jobs we assign." And boy, there were a lot. But in fact, I had assigned, I had gotten from somewhere, John Wayne. I'm a John Wayne fan, and it was kind of like John Wayne sitting there with his grizzled cowboy hat and his horse, and underneath it said, there were a hell of a lot of things they didn't tell me about this job, and I had it hanging up on my wall in the cubicle. It was really true, and I put a Port Authority sticker over the hat. And some people thought it was funny, and some of the bosses not quite so much. But that's pretty much what I did, here.
All right. Joan asked, she says her father, Roger Borup, was a founder of the Warehouse Point Trolley Museum and wrote the Transportation Bulletin, and was curious if you were familiar with his work.
I'm not at all. I'm sorry. No.
And then let's see, Jimmy says, when PennDOT resurfaced Route 88 from Riverview to the Black Diamond Junction, they ground down to the brickwork. All the rail was still in place compared to reports of the rail being
I remember that. I'm trying to think where I was coming from. And, but I was coming from somewhere in Westmoreland County, and I, came down from 51, and maybe it was 136, but I remember crossing the bridge and starting to go up Route 88, and it was all ground out there, and you could see where the switches were. You can see everything that was there. It was really cool, and I remember that. Maybe in the 90s, I think it was, but it was a while ago now. But yeah, it's all in there.
And you guys are allowed to unmute if you want to ask a question directly. You should be able to unmute yourself. And Darren asked if we could slow down the presentation, but the good news is it will be on YouTube, so you can pause on every slide if you want. So yeah,
it's a balancing act. I'd love to stay there and let you guys look at a slide a minute, but then I would get yelled at by Kristen, I think.
All right. Are there any further comments or questions for George? Yes, it should be on YouTube. I'm going to say by the end of next week. I'm going to do some editing so it flows a little better. Thank you to those who bared with us during the technical difficulties earlier, but we managed to work those out, so that's good.
Kristen, George.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is Ed Kohler from New York. I just want to say hello to Kristen again, but George, I'm sure if you're talking about this, Kristen would really not yell at you.
Well, she kept saying 45, and I think I was a little bit longer than that. Yeah, you were. Too long. But,
it wasn't too bad.
we'll have a talk. We'll have a talk about that.
And we still had. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ed.
It's really great stuff, but I have to agree with the other, with that other commenter, and from previous presentations by George. He seems to be, don't worry about the 45 minutes is all I'm going to say.
Well, there are times when, for example, when I was doing Wilkesboro for the Hoosier Beat, that there's somebody else coming up behind you, and you get used to moving a little faster. Now, when we had up close and personal, you could judge the audience, or you can even ask the audience, "Would you like me to slow down?" And on Zoom, it's a little bit. I guess we're all still getting our feet wet, even though I've done a couple of these. But Kristen and I will have a conversation when you get back from Queens.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody, again for joining us for our Trolleyology series. And thanks, George, for sharing. And thanks to those who are back this week after coming last week. And the links to the upcoming talks, again, are on our website. There will be another one next Wednesday and then one the following Tuesday. So I hope to see you guys there if you haven't registered already. But in the meantime, have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you.
You too, guys.
Thank you all for showing up and listening to me.
Good job, George.
Bye.